In January 1946, the record spoke of routine. Weather across Lower Silesia was clear. Rails had been inspected. An armored train was logged departing Wrocław shortly after dusk. Its cargo listed as state property under emergency order. Guards were armed, schedules matched. Nothing suggested disruption. By 11:15 p.m., the engine entered a border tunnel outside Wałbrzych. It did not emerge. The following hours unfolded in silence. Signal stations called unanswered. Local patrols reported warm rails leading only into a wall of earth. Families received sealed telegrams citing a catastrophic cave-in. No remains were returned. Archives closed the file with a single-line accident. Recovery impossible. 70 years later, workers cutting a metro shaft in Copenhagen struck steel plating far below the city. Behind it, a wagon sealed in silence. Inside were not bullion or bonds, but glass specimen slides, each holding fragments of human tissue catalogued by code. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from today. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Winter pressed against Lower Silesia in January 1946 with a kind of silence that had settled over the entire region. The war was over, but the rails still carried cargo under guard. Convoys stamped with urgency, stamped with secrecy. That night, the armored train assigned to Colonel Witold Rybak was scheduled for a transfer marked emergency. The papers bore his signature in thick blue ink. The cargo description read simply, "State Property." Nothing more. At 6 p.m., the train was prepared at the yard in Wrocław. The locomotive's headlamp burned against the frost. Guards checked rifles in unison, their boots crunching on the cinders. Marta Lewandowska, a young station clerk, filed the departure in her logbook with the usual precision engine number of wagons, official seal intact. She remembered the wagon walls, thick steel plating, black paint dulled with frost. She remembered, too, the quietness of the soldiers, how none spoke, only nodded when addressed. The journey began in routine. Small stations along the line recorded its passage. A farmer near Świebodzice recalled seeing the train lights burning through the night fog, brighter than any ordinary cargo. By 11 p.m., its schedule placed it at the tunnel mouth outside Wałbrzych. Witnesses confirmed the headlamp cutting through the darkness, the plume of smoke curling into the air. At 11:15 p.m., the train entered the tunnel. It did not emerge. The watchman at the southern portal waited, lantern raised. He marked the time in his notebook, then waited longer. The air smelled of smoke, but no light pierced the opposite end. He tapped the rail with his boot, still warm. By midnight, silence had thickened across the valley. Colonel Rybak, positioned at the rear-guard car, never filed another report. His name survives only in the transport order, now faded. The ink smudged where moisture entered the file. That single document marks the beginning of the trail and the first anchor in a case that has resisted every attempt at closure. In the morning, Marta Lewandowska logged an arrival that never came. She underlined the absence twice in her ledger. The paper trembled in her hand when she stamped it, because the rails were supposed to be predictable, measurable, counted, and here was a gap no one could explain. Hours later, telegrams were sent catastrophic collapse, no survivors, recovery impossible. The explanation arrived before any inspection had been allowed. Families of the soldiers received sealed envelopes. The train itself had vanished beneath stone, its cargo locked in silence. Only one item remained visible, retrieved from the control office days later, the transport order bearing Rybak's name, still smelling faintly of coal dust, edges frayed. The document carried a single word underlined in red pencil: emergency. The word was the only thing left to prove the train had ever moved at all. Rows of soldiers vanished behind paper. The gendarmerie arrived at dawn. Cold mist clung to the valley. Veiling the tunnel entrance, Captain Eric Novak, sent as liaison from the Czech side, stood beside Polish officers, staring at rails that should have carried an armored train out into open air. Instead, they ended at a wall of earth and broken stone, piled as if pressed in place by some deliberate force. Shovels struck the surface and rang against compacted fill. It was no natural collapse. Marek Zielinski, a rail worker summoned from Wałbrzych, ran his hand across the stones. Fresh-cut marks lined the fragments. He crouched and lifted a handful of soil, the damp grit sliding between his fingers. "Not more than a few days," he said in a low voice. Novak noted it in his field book. Soil samples, bagged and labeled, told the same story. Later the texture carried patterns of recent excavation, mixed with fragments of machine oil and ash. Inside the tunnel, torchlight illuminated rails still gleaming from heat. The metal carried the memory of weight recently passed, yet from the center point onward, the lines vanished beneath packed earth. Workers tapped the rock, listening for hollowness. Some swore they heard an echo, but orders came quickly: halt excavation, seal the area. By afternoon, soldiers erected barriers. Families of missing guardsmen appeared at the edge of the cordon, demanding answers. Novak kept his voice clipped. The collapse was sudden. No chance of survival. His words were repeated by Polish officials as if memorized. Helena Krautchik, widow of one of the escorts, wept against the barrier, clutching a folded telegram that offered condolences but no remains. Novak filed his interim report: structural failure, recovery impossible. Yet his private notebook recorded something else. He wrote of scorched ballast stones at the entry, of rails that stopped too neatly, of whispers from laborers who claimed they had seen truck convoys the same night the train was due. The page ended with a single line underlined twice: train absorbed by earth. The official file grew thin. The unofficial questions multiplied, but each was answered with silence. The silence of sealed orders and stamped decrees. The tunnel mouth was bricked, painted with warning signs, left to moss and weather. The rails ended at a wall that was not nature's work. Rumors filled the vacuum left by official silence. In taverns and kitchens, whispers spread of wagons heavy with bullion. A hidden treasury spirited away before foreign auditors could seize it. Children repeated tales of gold trains buried under mountains, their words shaping legends before the ground had cooled. But among railway men and border farmers, the story grew darker. Aneta Varga, who lived less than 2 kilometers from the sealed portal, recalled the night clearly. She spoke of covered trucks moving west along dirt roads hours after the disappearance. No markings, no headlights, only faint silhouettes against the moonlight. What lingered most for her was the smell that hung in the air afterward. Not smoke, not coal, but something acrid and chemical, drifting with the fog. Her statement was never archived. It survived only in the notebook of Joseph Klein, a border policeman who interviewed her. Weeks later, a spring flood revealed something unexpected. Children playing near a drainage ditch pulled loose a rusted crate lodged in the silt. Local police carried it to the station house. The stenciled words on the warped wood read, "Medical glass, handle with care." Inside, straw padding held fragments of shattered slides, sharp edges dulled by water. There was no sign of currency, no gold dust, no treasury seals. Klein logged the crate, photographed its remains. then received a telegram ordering immediate transfer to Warsaw. By the time he asked for a receipt, none was issued. His report survives only in carbon copy. The crate was never seen again. Still, the image of it persisted. Glass boxes meant for laboratories, not treasuries. The story of bullion faded in whispers, replaced by something harder to grasp. Farmers spoke of lights burning late in warehouses along the border, of wagons rerouted toward chemical plants now under military guard. At night, Varga claimed she heard faint grinding beneath the soil, like rails shifting under hidden weight. Others dismissed her, but when she died years later, her children found a cloth bundle under her floorboards. Inside was a splinter of that crate, varnish still carrying the faint smell of phenol. The legend of gold remained for the public. The reality had begun to point elsewhere. In a ditch, fragments of glass replaced the promise of treasure. The disappearance shifted from rumor to enforced silence. Weeks after the sealed tunnel was declared unsafe, couriers arrived from Warsaw carrying leather folders marked with the crest of the Ministry of Interior. Inside were directives stamped in red. All reports pertaining to the lost train were to be withdrawn, refiled under restricted access, and marked emergency. Local clerks watched as files were lifted from cabinets and replaced with blank covers. What had been an accident investigation became a classified matter overnight. Helena Krawczyk, widow of a guard assigned to the convoy, received a package by train post. Inside was a sealed coffin. No remains could be verified. A death certificate bore her husband's name, signed by a clerk she had never met. When she compared her document with those of other widows, each signature was identical, as if produced by a single hand. The paperwork traveled faster than grief. Colonel Witold Rybak's name appeared again, this time on a memo confirming heroic sacrifice in service to the state. Yet no funeral was permitted, only closed ceremonies without bodies. Families lit candles before empty caskets, the sound of shovels filling graves that contained nothing. In the archives, Marta Lewandowska noticed her own ledger entry had been altered, where she had underlined the absence twice. A superior pressed a new stamp over her ink journey completed. The station log now contradicted her memory. She carried the page in her satchel for years, the corner worn thin from her fingertips. At the tunnel, soldiers erected a barrier of stone and mortar. A painted sign warned of danger. Unstable ground, restricted access. Villagers avoided the site, though children dared each other to approach. Those who lingered claimed to hear metallic echoes when wind funneled through cracks in the wall. Captain Eric Novak filed his final Czech report cross-border incident. No further cooperation required. His tone was flat, but his private notes described pressure from above, orders to cease all inquiry. He left the valley with unease etched across his face, leaving behind only the soil bags he had hidden beneath his uniform. The official narrative hardened a collapse, unavoidable, irrecoverable. Families carried telegrams like death masks. Archives carried blank spaces where questions had been erased. And the train, sealed in its silence, was reduced to a line in a ledger that no one was permitted to read. All that remained visible was a row of identical signatures, inked by the same hand. 2 decades dulled the urgency, but not the ground itself. In 1966, surveyors arrived to prepare the region for electrification. Bulldozers scraped through the topsoil, and beneath the roots and stones they uncovered a stretch of iron rails, perfectly preserved though no map recorded them. The track curved away from the official line, vanishing under a ridge of soil as if it had been folded into the earth. Thomas Havel, an engineer from Brno, crouched over the exposed section. The spikes held firm, their heads only lightly corroded, as though buried deliberately rather than abandoned. He made precise notes in his journal, sketched the curvature, and photographed the rails before supervisors ordered the area filled again. Official paperwork cited misaligned infrastructure. No significance. Piotr Radetzky, a young surveyor on the team, questioned the decision. His instruments showed the track aligned exactly with the old Wałbrzych tunnel, the same tunnel sealed after the supposed collapse. He recorded the finding in his log, but when he submitted the report, the reference was missing from the final archive. A clerk handed him a revised version, stripped of his annotations. That night, Piotr removed a single rail spike before the bulldozers poured soil back into the trench. He wrapped it in cloth and carried it home. The iron was colder than the winter air, pitted with faint scorch marks. He kept it hidden in a drawer, an artifact that contradicted the official silence. The electrification project proceeded without incident. The rails were forgotten beneath layers of earth and concrete pylons, but those who had seen them remembered the unnatural preservation, the curve that should not have been there. Forensic photographs taken by Havel survived in his personal archive, tucked between drawings of bridges and viaducts. When he retired, he left them to his son, along with a note. These belonged to another line, a line not drawn on maps. Keep them. The soil once again swallowed the steel, but whispers resurfaced. Workers exchanged stories in hushed tones, repeating the tale of a train that had entered a tunnel and never emerged. They spoke of rails that reappeared like bones pushed upward by the earth. The spike remained in Piotr's drawer, mute and undeniable. Beneath the soil, orphaned rails refused to disappear completely. In the spring of 1973, demolition crews cleared the remains of an old warehouse near the Wałbrzych junction as the northern wall collapsed. A laborer uncovered a satchel half buried beneath brick dust. The leather was cracked, the buckles corroded, but inside were papers untouched by weather. The discovery was passed to local police, who quickly called in military intelligence. Among the contents were torn pages of a journal written in precise Latin script. The first lines referred to specimens in suspension. Further entries noted temperature thresholds, chemical preservatives, and phrases that unsettled even hardened investigators. Origin human. Subject viability terminated. At the bottom of one sheet was a name, handwritten in dark ink, Dr. A. Bork. Lieutenant Pavel Straka, tasked with the handover, read the fragments by lamplight before packing them into a sealed envelope. His official report summarized the find as miscellaneous personal notes. No significance. Yet Straka confided to a colleague that the handwriting suggested scientific training, the terminology unmistakable. The colleague warned him not to speak further. By the following week, the satchel was gone. Soldiers from Warsaw collected it under cover of night, their convoy departing without signatures, without receipts. Only the fragments copied hastily by Straka in his notebook survived. They described slides, numbered batches, and a reference to delivery by armored transport January 1946. The demolition site yielded nothing more. Bricks were cleared, foundations leveled, and a parking lot poured over the ground. Residents who had seen the satchel whispered about it, but no official record acknowledged its existence. Years later, Straka's notebook surfaced when his estate was cleared, pages brittle, ink fading, but the lines still legible. Specimens not gold, samples in glass, transport sealed by order, Dr. A. Bork. Historians who glimpsed the copy recognized the echo. The missing train's purpose had shifted again from bullion to archives, and now to biology. The pages ended abruptly, torn mid-sentence, leaving only one fragment at the bottom edge, batch 47. The rest was gone, sheared away by time or intention. The satchel vanished, but the name remained, etched in black ink, Dr. A. Bork. Decades passed. The legend of a vanished train drifted into rumor, its edges dulled by repetition. Then in 2016, the ground itself reopened the case. Crews extending the Copenhagen metro line drove drills deep beneath the old town. Seismographs registered an anomaly, an artificial resonance cavity, too regular to be natural. Engineers marked it on their charts with a question mark, then brought in heavier equipment. Lars Nyholm, senior engineer, reviewed the seismic logs late into the night. The hollow measured almost 40 meters in length, reinforced by dense metal sheathing. No local records showed a structure there when boring machines struck steel. Sparks showered in the shaft, the echo ringing like a bell through the concrete walls. Safety officers demanded a halt. Samples of the plating were raised to the surface, hardened steel alloy. Unlike any used in local construction, the fragment bore faint markings beneath corrosion, Polish letters barely discernible, the remnant of a factory stamp. City archivist Sophie Brandt, called to assess, cross-referenced the stamp. Her search led not to Danish files, but to Polish wartime manufacturers who produced armored wagons in 1945 and 1946. She traced the number to a production run ordered under Ministry of Public Health, Warsaw. As workers cut through the steel barrier, the drill revealed a curved wall behind it, riveted, painted in the faded olive green of military transport. The shape matched not a building foundation, but a wagon side. The cavern smelled of rust and enclosed air when first breached. Dust cascaded as the panels split, revealing darkness beyond. A camera probe lowered inside transmitted images of riveted walls, support beams, and the unmistakable contour of an armored carriage. The discovery was logged in the construction report as unexploded ordnance risk. The wording allowed officials to keep details from the press. Yet, among the engineering staff, word spread quickly. The missing train, long dismissed as myth, appeared to have surfaced beneath an unrelated city hundreds of kilometers away. What it carried had remained sealed for 70 years. The seismic printout showed the hollow, black on white, like a scar. The breach widened under controlled lighting. Dust hung in the chamber like pale smoke as the first team stepped across steel flooring that had not felt human weight in 70 years. What they found was not a full convoy, but a single armored wagon, detached, sealed tight against intrusion. Its paint flaked away in strips, exposing metal scarred by pressure. Specialists forced the lock, bolts shrieking as they yielded. Inside, rows of wooden crates filled the space, stacked in uniform columns. The stenciled words across their sides read, not Treasury or Bank, but Property of Ministry of Public Health. Warsaw. The phrase repeated across every surface, black ink seeping into dry timber. Dr. Mikkel Sørensen, the pathologist called to oversee inspection, pried one crate open. Straw padding shifted to reveal boxes of thin glass slides, arranged like books in a library. Each slide held a smear of wax-sealed tissue, pale against the light. The catalog numbers etched along the edges followed no familiar format, only sequences of alphanumeric code. Anna Eureka, a historian flown in from Warsaw, read the manifests tucked in the first crate. The paper listed batch 46G, batch 47H, followed by surnames crossed out in pencil. She froze when she recognized one name from deportation records she had studied years earlier. A portable microscope confirmed the horror. Beneath the lens, the tissue was not plant, not animal, but unmistakably human. Cellular structures intact, preserved beyond expectation. Each slide carried not gold, not bonds, but fragments of human life catalogued as inventory. Technicians logged the find with cold precision 214 crates, estimated tens of thousands of samples, each accompanied by coded sheets. A single lantern swinging overhead cast shadows across the walls, illuminating the silent order of boxes lined like coffins. Sorensen photographed one specimen slide before officials ordered the cameras down. The image captured a thin rectangle of glass glowing against black background, tissue suspended like a ghost. For decades, the legend had promised treasure. What lay inside the armored shell was a different archive, one of flesh and silence. Rows of glass slides gleamed under the first beam of light. Cataloguing began in silence. Each crate lifted from the wagon revealed more glass slides, neatly wrapped in brown paper, stacked like ledgers. Dr. Mikkel Sorensen placed them beneath a microscope one by one, recording dimensions, stains, and marks. What unsettled him most were the codes. Each slide bore an identical format, 2 numbers, a letter, then a dash with a final digit. Many carried the prefix 47H. Anna Yareka traced the codes through wartime prisoner lists. Hours of cross-referencing revealed faint patterns. Names of deported men and women disappeared from registries in early 1946 dates, aligning with the transfer order signed by Colonel Witold Rybak. Where the prisoner records ended, the slide codes began. The ledger lines matched too closely to ignore. The connection deepened when she discovered a marginal note in a camp archive. Samples forwarded delivery sealed by armored transport. The phrasing mirrored the journal fragment once attributed to Dr. A. Bork. The network of documents, scattered across decades, pointed toward one conclusion. The train had not carried bullion. It had carried biological archives, each slide a fragment of a vanished prisoner. Sorensen examined batch 47H under ultraviolet light. The tissue still fluoresced faintly. Preservatives intact after 70 years, he noted muscle fibers, traces of lung epithelium, fragments of skin. The samples were too consistent to be random. They were catalogued, systematized, human remains arranged in order like state property. One box contained a ledger more detailed than the rest. Inside were codes written in 2 hands, a scientist's steady script paired with a clerk's hurried scrawl. Each line paired a prisoner number with a batch designation. The final entry trailed off mid-sentence, ink blotting as if interrupted. The realization settled heavily over the chamber. The vanished train was not treasure concealed, but an archive of experiments. A mobile vault of human fragments disguised as state cargo. Officials photographed the ledger, then shut it quickly. The team was told to continue cataloguing but not to speculate. Yet whispers moved through the crew like drafts in the cavern. Each slide was a name erased, a life reduced to code. The legend of gold dissolved. What remained was the cold glow of batch 47H. The discovery stirred questions that met walls of silence. When Anna Yareka filed requests to Polish National Archives for corroborating manifests, the replies came swiftly, no records located. When she pressed further, access was revoked. Danish officials, citing diplomatic courtesy, declined to release the recovered slides for independent study. What little evidence surfaced was confined to photographs and copied ledgers, passed hand to hand among a narrowing circle. Dr. Mikkel Sorensen received an unsigned envelope weeks later. Inside lay a carbon copy memo typed on thin onion skin paper. The words were stark: do not open under any circumstance. Custody to remain under direct ministry authority. The date was February 1946, and the initials at the bottom matched those of Minister Janusz Stolarz, whose directives had once silenced the families of vanished guards. Journalist Nina Falk, who had been tracking the metro breach, managed to locate a retired Czech officer living quietly in Moravia. Major Karol Vesely spoke in a whisper, refusing to be recorded. "We were told it was treasure," he admitted, "but not to touch it, not to count it, not to open it." Later, I learned it was worse. They said the crates contained evidence, not wealth, evidence that could never see daylight. His words echoed the unease that had spread since the breach. Official communiques insisted the find was routine infrastructure debris. Engineers who signed early reports were summoned and instructed to issue corrections. Some refused, and their names disappeared from project rosters. Sorensen, pressed by colleagues, described one image only once, a slide marked Batch 46G, the tissue still faintly pink beneath the glass. After that, he fell silent. The suppression grew sharper as public rumors swelled. Stories of the lost gold train re-emerged in newspapers, deflecting attention back to treasure and away from the recovered specimens. Authorities allowed the myth to run, even encouraged it. Gold was a safer fantasy than human archives sealed in steel. Yet in private files, the carbon memo circulated like a contagion. "Do not open," the phrase repeated across borders, across languages, binding silence tighter than stone. The warning remained etched in black ribbon ink, fragile but unyielding. The work of connecting fragments fell to historians and archivists who refused to leave the trail cold. Anna Yareka spent nights in dim reading rooms, cross-checking deportation lists against numbers from the crates. Each slide code aligned with a name struck from records in early 1946. They were not random specimens, they were people reduced to tissue, catalogued as if for permanent storage. Sophie Brandt traced the Danish seismic files back through correspondence. She found references to foreign custodial transfer buried in municipal letters from the late 1940s, an oblique acknowledgement that officials knew of a sealed chamber but had no authority to breach it. The wording suggested coordination across borders. Journalist Nina Falk uncovered an index card tucked inside a Prague archive box. Its handwriting matched that of Dr. A. Bork. The card listed Batch 47H beside prisoner numbers from Gross-Rosen camp. The implication was clear material gathered during the war had been seized, then hidden under pretense of state transport. Further searches led to a coded ledger, its spine cracked, pages brittle. Each entry paired a prisoner identity with a slide batch designation. The ledger carried no title, only a cover stamped with an eagle emblem and the word custody in margins. Faint notes in Russian suggested Soviet handling after 1945. The train was not lost. It had been repurposed into a mobile vault of medical archives, passed from one authority to another before being buried. The chain of custody ran in overlapping circles: Nazi research records, Polish ministry stamps, Soviet annotations. Each hand used the same wagon as container, preserving fragments of evidence that could not be admitted, only concealed. When the ledger was presented in closed session to a committee of academics, the room fell silent. No one debated the handwriting or the codes. The weight lay in what they implied: a system that had converted human lives into specimens, then sealed them under steel with bureaucratic precision. The ledger's final page bore only 3 words, smudged by ink: delivery complete. January. The chain of custody closed with silence. The breach could not be undone. Once the armored wagon stood revealed, governments scrambled to shape the narrative. Official statements described historical medical material of indeterminate origin. Families of the vanished guards pressed for answers, their sealed coffins now exposed as empty. Requests for reclassification of relatives as test subjects were met with delay, then with silence. Poland and Denmark exchanged formal notes, each denying responsibility for custody. Czech officials declared no knowledge, yet documents surfaced showing signatures from all three states in the late 1940s, confirming shared awareness of the train's burial. The scandal ignited headlines, though each article quickly redirected toward the safer myth of hidden treasure. Gold, not glass, was easier to print. Dr. Mikkel Sørensen prepared a confidential report describing the slides as systematic biological archives consistent with human origin. The report was classified within days. Anna Jareka presented her findings in a closed university seminar. The hall emptied in uneasy silence. Journalists circled the edges of the story, but their pieces were spiked before reaching print. Nina Falk managed one article, published online late at night, before it vanished by morning. Only cached fragments remained, a description of crates arranged like coffins, of ledger pages pairing prisoner numbers with codes, of the word custody stamped on the cover. The wagon itself was resealed and moved under military escort to an undisclosed facility. Photographs taken before its removal show rows of specimen slides glowing under forensic light, their glass surfaces catching reflections like gravestones. In the valley near Wałbrzych, the tunnel where the train had once disappeared remained bricked and silent. Moss crept over stone. Farmers no longer spoke of gold. What haunted them instead was the idea that beneath the ground, in chambers unknown, fragments of human life still waited, catalogued, numbered, erased. The legend of treasure had promised closure. The reality left only unease. The last surviving image specimen slides shining like a cemetery of glass.